Hey guys, tonight we slip into the misty warmth of a Roman bathhouse. Yes, the kind of place where everybody's pretending not to look but absolutely, definitely is. The marble under your feet is slick from the constant trickle of warm water, steam curling up in ghostly ribbons, and you can smell a mix of mineral water, olive oil, and just a hint of the perfume someone clearly overdid. You probably won't survive this, at least not without blushing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the time where you are right now. I love knowing who's listening and when. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step past the attendant, handing over your sandals and tunic, and enter the tepidarium. Lukewarm to start, so the heat won't hit you like a brick. It's quieter here, the splash of water echoing softly off curved ceilings. You catch someone's eyes just long enough for it to feel deliberate, and before you can think too much about it, they look away with a faint smile. That's the game, glances that last just a fraction too long. Roman bathhouses weren't just for getting clean. They were social hubs, political arenas, and, quite frankly, slow-motion flirting machines. Historical records show that both men and women could attend, though depending on the time period and location, they might be segregated or visit at different hours. And in mixed settings, the rules of decorum loosened like the knots in a tired back. You're not talking about wild orgies here, that's Hollywood. This was about playful proximity. You pass into the caldarium, where the steam is thick enough to draw lazy lines with your finger in the air. In the haze, people's expressions soften. Hair clings slightly to skin, and voices lower to a murmur. Someone accidentally brushes your arm as they squeeze past to reach a spot near the hot water basin. The sensation lingers, not unpleasantly, under the warm fog. Historians still argue whether mixed-gender bathing in certain eras was more tolerated or frowned upon, but everyone agrees it offered a rare excuse to be near people you might otherwise never get close to. In the sudatorium, the steam room, you sit on the smooth bench and watch water droplets gather on the vaulted ceiling. Occasionally, a droplet breaks free and lands on someone's shoulder, and you catch them giving a little startled laugh. That's another cue, shared moments over tiny, sensory events. Someone points upward, joking about the rain, and you realize it's the perfect chance to slide into conversation without seeming too forward. The quirky part? Some bathers brought their own attendants not just for massages or oiling the skin, but for reconnaissance. Your personal slave or freedman might quietly scope the crowd, reporting back on who seemed interested, or casually arranging for you to bump into a certain someone. Think of it like having a wingman who also carries your towel. You're half listening to a group nearby talk about the latest chariot race when you notice one woman subtly adjusting the way her stola drapes over her shoulder, revealing the curve of a collarbone a little more than before. Not scandalous, just enough for the viewer's mind to fill in the rest. A man across from her laughs at something trivial, but his gaze keeps darting back. The Romans understood that showing less could often entice more. Now you move to the frigidarium, the cold plunge. It's bright here, light spilling in from a high window, and the shock of cold water feels like a dare. You jump in, gasping, and as you surface, you hear someone laughing. Not at you exactly, but at the shared absurdity of it. Cold plunges were notorious for sharpening the senses, and yes, even a flirtatious exchange could feel heightened in that instant. Of course, not everyone in the bathhouse was open to such interactions. There were strict codes of politeness: hover too close or stare too long, and you'd get the Roman equivalent of an icy shoulder. And gossip traveled faster than hot water through a lead pipe. One wrong move and your reputation could chill overnight. Still, you can't help noticing that many of these exchanges are designed to leave you wondering, was that intentional? Did that smile mean something? It's a slow burn, layered under the hum of daily life. You might leave the bathhouse unsure if anything really happened, and yet you'll find yourself showing up at the same time tomorrow. And as you wrap yourself in a towel, stepping past the gossiping groups and the rhythmic splash of someone washing oil from their skin, you realize that the bathhouse isn't just about the water. It's about the currents moving silently between people. The heat loosens more than muscles. It loosens the invisible distance between strangers. You step out of the bathhouse, skin warm and faintly scented from the olive oil, and the bright chatter of the forum pulls you in like a tide. The air here is a different kind of heat. Sunlight bouncing off pale stone. A swirl of voices from merchants, politicians, beggars, and gossip mongers. You drift into the crowd, pretending to browse stalls while scanning faces. The forum isn't just the nerve center of Roman politics. It's where chance meetings can be engineered with almost military precision. The cobblestones under your sandals feel uneven, guiding your steps toward the shadow of a tall portico. Here, the game begins, positioning yourself where the right person will just happen to pass by. It's no secret that some Romans practically timed their errands for optimal run-ins. The historian Pliny even mentions people haunting the forum, not for work, but for the company. You spot a young man lingering by a spice seller's table, not really looking at the jars of saffron, but at the woman pretending to haggle nearby. The stall holder is playing along, offering absurdly high prices so she can toss her head and smile in mock outrage. The man joins the joke with a remark about daylight robbery. And just like that, the ice is broken. It's retail theater with a romantic subplot. You wander closer to the open space in front of the basilica. The sound of footsteps echoes under the colonnade, and you catch someone's shadow falling alongside yours. They match your pace for a moment, close enough for you to feel the heat radiating from their tunic sleeve, before veering off with a little nod. Did they mean to brush against you, or was it the chaos of the crowd? Historians still argue whether the forum's layout, with its choke points and narrow passageways, encouraged these micro-encounters or if it was purely incidental. There's a quirky detail here. Some Romans used pet dogs as social magnets. A cute little lapdog on a silken leash could be an icebreaker, attracting comments and, conveniently, giving the owner an excuse to stop and chat. Inscriptions even show affection for pets in ways that sound suspiciously like bragging rights for their charm. You imagine someone kneeling to scratch a dog's ears, only to glance upward and find themselves caught in a smile. The market stalls hum with life, vendors calling out in Latin and Greek, the thump of amphorae being set down, and somewhere the metallic chime of a coin purse being opened. You notice a couple weaving through the crowd together, hands not quite touching, but close enough that every step feels intentional. They pause at a stall selling figs, and she picks one up, splitting it in half and offering him the sweeter piece. That's not just generosity, that's a language of intimacy, one fruit at a time. The forum also doubled as a fashion runway. Men might wear their finest, freshly bleached togas, sometimes almost blindingly white from chalk and careful washing, while women let the colors of their stolas speak for them. Deep purples for wealth, soft greens and golds for elegance. You catch one man tugging slightly at the hem of his toga as he spots someone across the square, straightening himself like a soldier preparing for inspection. You linger by a fountain, the cool water rippling under the afternoon light. A young woman kneels to fill her jug, and as she rises, a few drops spill onto her sandal. The man beside her laughs softly, offering his scarf to dab it dry. She refuses, but her smile lingers a heartbeat too long. It's the smallest of gestures, but in the forum's open stage, even that's enough to set imagination spinning. Sometimes, flirtation in the forum wasn't even face-to-face. Rumors and teasing could circulate in real time. If someone mentioned your name with a raised eyebrow while coincidentally glancing toward you, the message was clear. This was a place where reputations were shaped in the moment, where an overheard compliment could spark weeks of accidental crossings of paths. By late afternoon, the sun casts long shadows between the columns, and the air cools just enough to make lingering pleasant. People who had somewhere to be earlier suddenly find themselves with nowhere to go. You see them, two people who've been circling each other all day, finally pausing at the same stall. She pretends to consider a jar of honey. He pretends to ask about the weather. The merchant looks from one to the other with a knowing smirk. You pass them on your way out of the forum, the sound of their laughter trailing after you. It's clear that in this place, attraction is less about bold declarations and more about weaving yourself into someone's path until the thread becomes impossible to ignore. The forum's hum fades behind you as you follow the pull of a different kind of crowd noise. A rolling roar, the kind that vibrates in your ribs before you even see the source. The amphitheater looms ahead, its arches swallowing the bright afternoon light, and the smell of roasted nuts mingles with the faint tang of dust and sweat. Inside, it's a tidal wave of humanity, tens of thousands of voices swelling in cheers, groans, and sudden laughter. Finding your seat is an adventure in itself. You squeeze past knees and elbows, apologizing with a smile, and notice how that smile gets returned more than politely. In the amphitheater, you're all packed together, strangers turned temporary neighbors. That closeness has its perks, especially if you're here to do more than watch the games. You settle into a spot just as two gladiators enter the arena, the crowd surging with anticipation. The man to your right leans over, muttering a prediction about the fight. You catch the glint in his eyes when you laugh in agreement. A shared opinion, especially when the crowd is divided, feels like joining a little secret club. Historians still argue whether such seating arrangements were purely practical or subtly social, but it's clear that proximity in a high-energy environment created opportunities for instant rapport. It's not all swordplay and shouting, though. Between bouts, vendors thread through the stands, balancing trays of wine cups and pastries. One young woman buys two, passing one to the man beside her without a word. He accepts it with a smile that says he knows exactly what that means. Sharing food in the amphitheater wasn't just generosity. It was a gesture that lingered, sweeter than the honey cakes themselves. The amphitheater was also an open theater for the eyes. You might catch someone's gaze across the rows, hold it for a beat longer than necessary, then look away. It's dangerous and delicious at once, because you can pretend you didn't mean it, but also wonder if they'll look back. You find yourself doing exactly that now, exchanging fleeting glances with someone 3 rows down. The noise of the crowd masks the subtle dance between you. Quirky detail? Some fans came wearing their favorite gladiators' colors, and matching with someone else could be a conversation starter. Imagine two strangers realizing they're both in the vivid red of a particular fighter's faction. Suddenly, there's a reason to chat about technique, victories, or the injustice of a referee's call. In a way, supporting the same gladiator was like matching playlists today. A sudden roar jolts you back to the present. The winning blow has landed, and the victor raises his sword. The crowd goes wild, and without thinking, you and your seat neighbor shout together, voices tangled in the same cheer. The brief brush of their arm against yours as they gesture to the arena feels oddly intimate amid the chaos. Between events, entertainers wander the stands. Acrobats, jugglers, even a few cheeky performers making light of the violence below. Their humor gives you excuses to lean toward your neighbor and share a laugh. It's hard not to bond when you're both wiping tears of laughter from your eyes at some ridiculous pantomime. You notice, too, that the amphitheater offers a certain camouflage. Couples can lean close under the guise of discussing the fight, their words lost in the uproar. A whispered joke, a shared smirk, hidden in plain sight. One pair nearby is doing just that, their heads tilted close, their laughter drowned by the crowd. By the time the last match ends, the sun is dipping, gilding the upper arches in soft light. The crowd spills into the streets, still buzzing from the day's excitement. You catch one last look from that person in the third row as they disappear into the press of people. It's not a promise, not exactly, but you know that if fate is feeling generous, you might just see them again at the next games. You leave the roar of the amphitheater behind, your ears still ringing faintly with cheers, and step into a different kind of performance, the Roman banquet. The villa's doorway is flanked by flickering oil lamps, and a servant ushers you inside. Warm light spills over polished marble floors, bronze platters gleam under the glow, and the air hums with the layered scent of roasted meats, fresh herbs, and the faint sweetness of honey wine. Banquets were more than meals. They were social chessboards, and seating was the opening move. The triclinium, the 3 couches arranged around a low table, meant you'd recline at an angle, propped on your left elbow, facing not only the food but also your fellow diners. If you were clever, or if your host was feeling mischievous, your place could be next to someone whose company might turn a simple meal into something much more interesting. You take your spot, noticing that the person beside you shifts ever so slightly closer as they settle in. Reclining meant your knees might almost touch, and the space for hands under the table was negotiable. Historians still argue whether such arrangements were primarily about politics or pleasure, but the truth is they often served both. The first course arrives: olives, cheeses, little fried fish, and you catch your neighbor's eye as you both reach for the same dish. You let them take it first, and they pass you a piece without breaking gaze. It's a small gesture, but in a banquet, every shared bite is a conversation in itself. Some Romans played this game with deliberate skill. A spilled drop of wine, a forgotten morsel on the lip, an offered napkin, each a spark in the slow burn of flirtation. The quirky detail? There were even informal banquet signals, like tapping a finger against your cup to mean "watch me," or brushing your hair back with a certain motion to hint at interest. They weren't universal, but in the right circles, they were understood. The conversation flows around you. Politics, poetry, gossip, but your attention keeps circling back to the person beside you. A joke passes down the couch, and you both laugh, leaning in at the same time so your shoulders touch briefly. The contact is casual enough to ignore, but pleasant enough to repeat. Then comes the entertainment. Musicians with soft lyres, a poet reciting verses that are just suggestive enough to make a few guests raise their eyebrows. The host grins knowingly. After all, banquets were about creating an atmosphere. Even the food played a role: figs, oysters, pomegranates, all with reputations as mood enhancers, whether they truly worked or not. Wine, of course, loosens tongues. Cups are refilled generously, and soon the room hums with a warmth that's not just from the oil lamps. Across the table, you spot another pair laughing a little too privately over something. The woman covers her mouth to hide a smile, but her eyes give her away. Your own neighbor shifts again, this time brushing your wrist as they reach for a platter of roasted game. It could be an accident, but the faint curl of their lips suggests otherwise. You respond by passing them a dish before they ask, a silent acknowledgement that the game is mutual. As the evening stretches on, the room grows softer in tone. Servants clear the remains of the main course, replacing them with honey cakes and bowls of fruit. Someone plucks a grape and holds it up to the light, teasing the person next to them before letting it drop into their mouth. It's playful, almost childish, but in the glow of the banquet, it works. By the time the final cup is poured, you're not sure whether it was the wine, the poetry, or the seating that made the night feel so charged. You exchange a few last words with your neighbor, both of you lingering just long enough for the farewell to mean more than politeness. As you step out into the cool night air, you catch yourself wondering, was that only a dinner companion, or the start of something worth arranging another accidental seating for? The night air still clings faintly with the scent of roast meats from the banquet, but by morning, the city smells different. Fresh bread from the bakeries, damp stone from last night's dew, and, weaving between it all, the unmistakable swirl of perfumes. You follow it down a narrow street to a small shop where glass bottles glint in the sunlight. Here, fragrance isn't just about smelling nice. It's a weapon in the art of attraction. Perfume in Rome wasn't dabbed lightly. Oils infused with rose, jasmine, cinnamon, or even exotic resins from Arabia were rubbed onto skin, hair, and clothing. You step inside the shop, where a merchant grins knowingly as you linger over a vial of spikenard oil. He suggests, with a wink, that it's popular with those seeking company. You imagine the subtle trail it would leave as you walked past someone in the forum or the baths. A message carried not in words but in air. Outside, you see how the trick works in real life. A woman in a deep green stola passes, and a wave of myrrh follows her. Two men turn their heads, not obviously, just enough to mark that the scent has caught them. Historians still argue whether heavily perfumed clothing was considered a bit too forward, but it's clear that, done right, it could spark curiosity without a glance exchanged. You decide to test the theory. As you move through the marketplace, you pass close enough to a stranger for the breeze to catch the oil on your wrist. They pause, turn slightly, and their eyes linger on you for a heartbeat before they continue walking. It's fleeting, but you feel the silent connection spark and vanish in the same breath. There's a quirky detail about Roman perfume habits. They sometimes scented not just themselves, but the objects they carried: scarves, writing tablets, even the hems of togas. A whiff of familiar fragrance left on a shared cushion or cloak could be enough to make someone think of you later. Imagine leaving your mark not with a note, but with a ghost of scent that clung long after you were gone. Of course, there were pitfalls. Wear too much and you risked being labeled pretentious or even suspiciously decadent. Martial, the ever-sarcastic poet, once mocked a man for smelling like an entire perfume stall. The trick was balance, enough to be remembered, not so much that people remembered for the wrong reasons. You pass by a shaded courtyard where two people stand close, speaking in low voices. From where you are, you can't hear the words, but the air between them seems warmer somehow, made hazy by the scent of frankincense wafting from a small brazier nearby. The fragrance isn't just background. It's part of the scene, setting the mood the way music might today. Later, at the public gardens, you notice couples strolling among rose bushes, occasionally brushing petals between their fingers. The oil from the flowers clings faintly to their skin, a natural perfume picked up in the act of leisure. You can't help but wonder if some strolls were less about enjoying the plants and more about carrying their scent into the next conversation. By midday, you've learned that in Rome, perfume was never neutral. It was as calculated as a smile, as intentional as a well-placed compliment. Whether brushed onto a neck before entering a bathhouse or left to drift from the folds of a tunic in the breeze, it was a message, one the nose could catch before the heart even knew it had been hooked. By the time the sun dips low, the streets hum with a different kind of energy, the hush of messages in motion. You wander into a quieter quarter, where the plaster walls of Inslee are scrawled with all manner of graffiti. Political slogans, crude doodles, boasts of love, and, if you know how to look, more subtle notes meant for very specific eyes. In Rome, words didn't always need parchment. A casual passerby might see only a messy scribble, but for the person who knew the hand that wrote it, those words could be electric. Imagine walking past a wall you pass every day, only to see a phrase in familiar handwriting. Met you at the baths. Same time tomorrow. The city itself became the stationery. Wax tablets, though, were the real currency of quiet flirtation. Small, portable, and easily erased, they could be passed through servants, left in a cloak at the baths, or even tucked into a merchant's basket to be delivered accidentally. You picture one now, resting on a low table, the thin layer of wax hiding a message carved with a stylus. A compliment too bold to speak aloud in the forum. There's a quirky detail historians love. Some lovers used palimpsests, scraping old messages from wax tablets but leaving the faintest trace behind, so only someone paying close attention could see the ghost of earlier words. It was both practical and deliciously reckless. As you wander, you spot a fresh piece of graffiti near a tavern door. The letters are quick and looping, spelling out Felix amat Livia. Felix loves Livia. To everyone else, it's just another love boast, but maybe to Livia, passing here on her way to market, it's a little shock of warmth before the day begins. Historians still argue whether public graffiti like this was meant for the person named or simply to show off the writer's feelings to everyone. Either way, it turned a wall into a stage. You pass a pair of young men in deep conversation, one clutching a rolled tablet. His friend teases him loudly, and he turns red before disappearing into a side street. You can guess where he's going. The direct delivery of a note carried more risk than wall writing, but it also had its perks. Immediacy, privacy, and the thrill of knowing the message was in their hands right now. Not all messages were written in words. Some graffiti used symbols, an amphora for a shared drink, a pair of eyes for "I'm watching you," even a sketch of a fig, which carried its own suggestive meaning. For those in the know, these pictures were as clear as text. As night falls, oil lamps throw golden light across the walls, making the scratches of graffiti look older, softer. You can almost imagine someone slipping into the shadows to carve a quick line before darting away, heart racing, hoping the right eyes will see it before the city wakes. Later, passing a closed perfume shop, you notice something small. Someone has drawn a looping vine just beside the doorframe. To anyone else, it's decoration. But to the person who gave a certain someone a sprig of ivy last week, it's an invitation. Rome was a city where messages could cling to walls, travel in pockets, or vanish under the sweep of a stylus. Whether public declarations or quiet codes, they were proof that attraction had its own language, and it didn't always need a voice. Morning sunlight slants across the streets, turning the pale stone into a soft gold, and you notice the city is already alive with motion. But today, instead of following the noise of the market or the smell of bread, your eyes catch on something else entirely. Fabric, the way it drapes, moves, catches the light. In Rome, clothing could speak as loudly as any whispered compliment. And for those who knew how to use it, fashion was its own form of flirtation. The toga, for example, wasn't just a sheet of cloth, it was a social billboard. How you folded it, the width of the stripe, the brightness of the white, these told the world your status before you said a word. But beyond status, there was room for playful adjustments. A toga could be draped just a little looser than usual, giving a flash of the tunic underneath, or pulled tighter in a way that showed the curve of the arm and shoulder. Women had even more freedom in the stola, the long dress that could be cinched high or low with a girdle. You pass one woman whose girdle sits a little higher than fashion strictly dictates, the folds of her fabric falling in a way that draws the eye without breaking any rules. You wonder if she tied it like that on purpose, or if she knows the effect it has on passersby. Historians still argue whether certain accidental slips of clothing in Rome were truly accidental or carefully engineered. A tunic strap sliding off one shoulder, a sandal lacing left a little loose. These might happen naturally in the summer heat, but in the right moment, they could be as deliberate as a wink. Then there were the colors. Deep, expensive purples signaled wealth and exclusivity. Bright saffron or emerald green could make someone stand out in a crowd. You see a man in a vivid blue cloak pausing at a fountain, clearly aware of the way people's eyes follow him. The quirky part? Romans even scented their clothes, so the fabric itself carried a hint of rose or cinnamon. Imagine turning your head toward a flash of color and being met with fragrance. 2. In the busy market, clothing becomes part of the performance. A merchant's assistant leans forward to reach for a jar, the sleeves of her tunic falling back to reveal bracelets catching the light. She glances up to find someone watching, smiles faintly, then goes back to work. The movement looks unplanned, but you've seen it repeated enough today to know better. Sometimes, fashion flirtation took the form of mimicry. Wearing a shade of fabric you'd seen someone else in before, or arranging your hair in a style they admired, could send a quiet signal. It was a way of saying, "I noticed you," without saying it at all. As the sun climbs higher, you pass under the shade of a colonnade where a group of young people are lounging, laughing, their togas and stolas carefully draped. One man pretends to adjust his clothing, tugging the fabric to expose the edge of a tattoo on his shoulder. A personal, rebellious little flourish. Tattoos weren't common among Rome's elite, so showing one off was like letting someone peek behind the curtain. Even the poorest Romans could play the game. A simple, well-washed tunic, a neatly knotted belt, or a flower tucked into the folds could elevate the everyday into something worth noticing. And in a city where eyes were always watching, those little touches could be enough to start a story. As you head toward the market square, you spot a young woman balancing a basket of figs on her hip. The way her stola shifts with each step reveals just enough of her ankle to make one nearby man drop his gaze, then look back quickly. She doesn't acknowledge it, but you see the corner of her mouth twitch upward. Clothing in Rome wasn't just protection from the sun or a marker of class. It was a living, moving part of the conversation between strangers. Every fold, every color, every accidental reveal was another line in a dialogue spoken without sound. The market is already in full swing by the time you arrive, a living river of voices and movement. Merchants shout over one another. The scent of fresh herbs mingles with the salt tang of fish stalls, and somewhere a donkey brays in protest at being jostled by a crowd. This is where Rome comes to trade, but also where it comes to spar verbally and socially. If the forum was about chance meetings, the market was about crafted encounters. You start at a stall selling ripe figs, their skins taut and glistening in the morning light. The merchant notices you eyeing them and names a price so outrageous it makes you laugh aloud. That's the opening. You lean in, squint at the fruit like you're a senator inspecting a suspicious law, and offer a number so low it's practically theft. The two of you go back and forth, your voices rising and falling in mock outrage, and the people around you glance over, amused. It's not just haggling, it's theater. And yes, it's also flirting. The beauty of this setting is that it gives both sides an excuse to banter. A raised eyebrow here, a feigned insult there. It's all part of the performance. You've heard of couples who met this way. Their first conversations nothing more than a volley of exaggerated complaints over the price of wine or the freshness of a loaf. Historians still argue whether market flirtation was common among strangers or mostly between people who already had a history. But the evidence in poetry and plays suggests that many Romans understood the thrill of being publicly at odds with someone you secretly liked. It let you be bold without stepping outside the lines because on the surface you were just talking about produce. There's a quirky detail in this world of barter. Some merchants deliberately left a little flaw in their goods, a slightly bruised apple, a chipped jug, because it invited comment. That comment could lead to a joke, and the joke to a longer conversation. In a city where introductions could be awkward, a flawed fig might be worth its weight in gold. Moving deeper into the market, you spot a fishmonger who seems to be caught in exactly this kind of game. A customer stands across from him, hands on hips, feigning exasperation. He throws his hands up in mock defeat, tosses a sprig of rosemary into her basket for free, and she laughs, shaking her head as she walks away. Her smile lingers long after she's turned the corner. You find yourself drawn to the bread stalls next, where the scent is so rich it almost tastes sweet in the air. A baker's apprentice catches your eye as he kneads dough, his forearms dusted with flour. He grins, deliberately drops a small piece of bread, and offers it to you before the pigeons get it. You take it, biting into the warm crust, and the exchange is over in moments, but it leaves a warmth that has nothing to do with the bread. Markets were also excellent places for subtle physical cues. The narrow lanes meant brushing past someone was inevitable. A hand might rest briefly on your back to guide you past a crowded stall, fingers lingering just long enough to be noticed. You experience it yourself near a wine seller's table. A polite touch that somehow feels more personal than it should. By late morning, the market begins to thin, the sun now high enough to warm the cobblestones. You pause at a spice stall, inhaling the sharp scent of cinnamon and pepper. The seller leans in and tells you that the right blend can make people remember you after you've gone. He's talking about food, but you can't help hearing the double meaning. When you finally leave, your basket is heavier but your purse lighter, and yet you feel as though you've gained more than you bought. In the Roman market, the coins exchanged were only part of the trade. The rest was laughter, glances, and the gentle art of turning everyday commerce into something a little more thrilling. The market's din fades behind you, replaced by the soft, measured hush of the temple district. Here, the air smells faintly of incense, mingling with the mineral tang of worn stone. You tread carefully, less because of the marble steps beneath your sandals, more because of the weight of the place. Even in Rome, where religion and daily life are tightly woven, temples hold a special kind of hush, the kind that makes every gesture feel amplified. You drift toward a small shrine tucked between two larger, grander structures. It's dedicated to Venus, of course, the goddess whose portfolio conveniently includes both love and beauty. And if you were hoping for a quiet, purely spiritual scene, well, you might be disappointed. This place hums with a different sort of offering. On the altar, among the polished coins and garlands of flowers, you spot tiny charms, miniature figurines, carved wooden hearts, little folded scraps of parchment tied with red thread. Some are prayers for luck and romance, others a way of leaving a piece of yourself for someone else to find. You watch a young woman kneel, place a delicate bronze dove on the altar, and whisper something so softly you can't catch the words. As she stands, she glances toward a man waiting by the steps. He doesn't move, but the smallest smile touches his lips. Historians still argue whether these romantic offerings were truly private petitions to the gods or more like public displays meant to be seen. The truth is probably both, because in a city as crowded as Rome, it's hard to keep a secret, even from the divine. There's a quirky detail. Some lovers use temples almost like a postal service. A token might be left in a specific niche or under a certain statue, with the understanding that the intended person would retrieve it later. It was risky, anyone could find it, but maybe that danger was part of the thrill. Inside the temple, the air is cool, dimly lit by narrow shafts of sunlight cutting down from high windows. You notice a man lighting a small oil lamp before the statue, his hands steady but his eyes flicking once toward someone across the aisle. The woman there pretends to be absorbed in her own prayer, but when she rises, she passes close enough that the fringe of her cloak brushes his hand. You move toward the rear of the temple, where offerings are less formal. Here, carved messages have been tucked into the base of the wall. Tiny, scratched Latin phrases invoking blessings or naming names. Some are centuries old, others fresh enough to feel almost warm. You find one that reads simply, "Soar meum tuum est." My heart is yours. No God mentioned, just a bare confession, left in sacred space. Back outside, you watch as a pair of young men approach the fountain beside the temple steps. One pretends to wash his hands while the other leans in to murmur something, their laughter quickly smothered. Around them, the world moves on, oblivious, or maybe not. In Rome, you can never be sure who's paying attention. By the time you leave the temple grounds, you've seen enough to know that devotion and desire often walked hand in hand here. Offerings weren't always about divine favor, they were about human connection, framed in the language of faith. The gods, one suspects, didn't mind playing matchmaker. By the time you wander back toward the city's main streets, the hum of the market has mellowed into the lilting strains of music. Somewhere ahead, a flute trills brightly, its notes bouncing between the stone walls. You follow the sound until you spill into a small square where a crowd has gathered in loose circles. At the center, a pair of street musicians are in full performance mode. One with a curved double flute, the other with a frame drum that rattles with tiny bronze discs. Their rhythm is infectious, a bright, skipping beat that pulls people closer. You don't even notice at first how it's more than just entertainment. It's a gathering point. Here, in the easy mood of live music, strangers find excuses to stand near one another. A woman sways gently beside you, and when you glance her way, she smiles without breaking rhythm. You give a small nod in time with the beat, a harmless acknowledgement, but one that lingers just a little too long to be accidental. Street music had this peculiar effect in Rome. It loosened the rules. In the Forum, you might be cautious about how you spoke to a stranger. Here, with melody as a buffer, the air felt lighter, freer. Historians still argue whether professional street performers made a living purely on coin or if some were also hired to create these social spaces on purpose. The truth is probably tangled in both commerce and culture. You catch a quirky moment when a young man in the crowd tosses the flutist a small sprig of laurel, a gesture that earns him a cheeky wink and a quick shift in the melody. Almost immediately, a few others do the same, tossing flowers, bits of ribbon, even a coin wrapped in colored thread. It becomes a game, each gift rewarded with a playful flourish or a sly grin. At the edge of the crowd, you spot a pair of men who clearly know the musicians. Between songs, they call out teasing requests, and the drummer answers with little rhythmic jokes between beats, short bursts that make the crowd laugh. You notice one of the men using the moment to step closer to someone new, the music providing a perfect excuse for a shared laugh and a murmured comment. There's an intimacy in shared listening, standing shoulder to shoulder, reacting to the same sound at the same moment. It creates a small, invisible bridge between you and whoever's near. You test it, leaning slightly toward the woman beside you when the music softens, whispering a guess about the next tune. She grins, corrects you, and for a brief moment you feel like co-conspirators in a game no one else knows you're playing. When the song ends, the flutist gestures for the crowd to clap in time, drawing the beat out longer. This is when the performers scan the faces around them, eyes lingering here and there. You've heard stories that sometimes, after the music stopped, a musician would pass a message along, accidentally dropping it near a certain listener. Whether that's romantic legend or reality, you're not sure, but the idea fits. The music swells again, and now couples at the edge begin to dance. Small steps, nothing formal, just movement in time with the drum. You see one young man offer his hand to a stranger, bowing with exaggerated formality before leading her into the rhythm. She laughs, her cheeks flushed, and the crowd shifts to give them space. As the performance winds down, the musicians collect their tips, thanking the crowd with exaggerated bows. People begin to drift away, but a few linger, their conversations low and easy, clearly in no hurry to end whatever connection just began. You leave the square with the echo of the music still in your ears, carrying the warm, lingering energy of a shared moment. Rome, you realize, had its love notes in wax and its whispered words in gardens, but sometimes all it took was a melody played in the right place, at the right time, to make strangers into something more. The roar hits you before you even see the arena. It's not the polite applause of a theater crowd. It's a tidal wave of sound, deep and throaty, rolling out from the Circus Maximus like the heartbeat of the city. You follow the noise, weaving through streams of people heading the same way, their excitement humming in the air. The smell arrives next. Trampled grass, horse sweat, and the faint metallic tang of wool rims freshly oiled. By the time you squeeze into the packed stands, the race is already underway. The chariots blur past in a streak of color: red, blue, green, white, each team's banners snapping in the wind. The seating here is a social chessboard. The wealthy recline in shaded boxes, the common folk crowd together on stone benches, and the gamblers cluster along the rail, muttering odds under their breath. But amid the chaos, you notice something subtler. The way eyes dart and linger, the way people accidentally meet glances across the curved sweep of the arena. Historians still argue whether the circus was more about sport or about being seen. For the elite, it was definitely both. You came to watch the races, yes, but also to watch the watchers. A quirky tradition plays out beside you. Two women have arrived with tiny baskets of fresh nuts, and instead of eating them, They're tossing one at a time toward someone sitting 3 rows down. He catches each with theatrical flair, saluting them with the smallest tilt of his cup. The rest of the crowd is too focused on the track to notice, but you can tell this is their own private game. You scan the opposite side of the arena, spotting a man who seems to be doing the same thing, searching the crowd rather than the race. And when his gaze lands on someone, the stillness of that shared look feels louder than the pounding hooves. It's fleeting, swallowed instantly by the next lap's frenzy, but it lingers like a spark in your mind. The races themselves feed the flirting. Every twist and near collision is a perfect excuse to gasp, laugh, or clutch the person beside you. You see it happen just a few seats over. A man leans forward to comment on a particularly sharp turn, his voice low, and the woman next to him answers with a grin that could mean anything. There's an almost conspiratorial feeling in being part of such a massive crowd. The noise covers whispers, the movement hides small touches, and the shared thrill of the race gives you a ready-made conversation starter. Between heats, vendors weave through the stands selling wine, bread, and honey cakes. You watch a young couple split one, passing the bite back and forth with exaggerated care, as though ensuring not a crumb is lost. Another pair share a wineskin, laughing when a drop spills, the man leaning in to catch it with his sleeve. The track announcer calls for the next race, and the crowd surges to its feet. You can feel the pulse of anticipation ripple through everyone, making it almost impossible not to turn and meet someone's eye. The chariots line up, the gates fly open, and the whole stadium tilts forward as the teams thunder past. Somewhere in that chaos, a glance is returned, and for a second it feels like the two of you are the only ones in this roaring sea of thousands. The next lap will break it, but for now, the race is secondary. When the victor finally claims his crown of palm leaves, the crowd begins to thin, spilling back into the city's streets. Some leave alone, others in pairs that didn't arrive together. You can't help but wonder how many of today's chance meetings started with nothing more than a shared look over the thunder of hooves. You leave the dusty roar of the Circus Maximus behind and drift toward a quieter quarter of the city. The streets here are narrower, shaded by tall insulae whose windows hang with laundry like bright banners. The smell changes, less sweat and churned earth, more bread baking, herbs wilting in the sun, and the faint sweetness of wine spilling from a tavern door. The popina you choose is small, almost hidden, just a painted sign of a rooster above the entrance. Inside, the light is golden and dim, filtered through a curtain of hanging beads. The air is warm with steam from a simmering pot of lentils and the sharp scent of garum. Papini were the Roman answer to neighborhood bars, part eatery, part gossip hub, part social trap. You grab a seat on a worn wooden bench, close enough to the counter to watch the owner ladle wine into clay cups. Two men at the far table are arguing over gladiator match predictions. Their debate interrupted only when one of them glances toward a woman seated alone near the wall. She's got the kind of poise that makes it hard to tell if she's waiting for someone or simply enjoying the spectacle of everyone else. You notice how her fingers play along the rim of her cup in slow, deliberate circles, an unspoken rhythm that seems to draw glances without demanding them. Historians still argue whether Papini were respectable meeting places or mostly haunts for the rougher crowd. The reality probably depends on the hour, the owner, and the street. What's certain is that their intimacy, the low ceilings, the clinking cups, the shared benches, meant people could not help brushing shoulders. You see it in motion when a man, clearly new to the place, squeezes into the bench opposite her. He starts with a joke about the watery wine, and she answers without a smile but with just enough amusement in her eyes to keep him trying. The papina's hum swallows the awkward silences, letting conversation grow in little bursts. There's a quirky tradition here, too. The owner keeps a small basket of walnut shells behind the counter, and patrons with good aim try to toss them into empty cups across the room. You watch a younger man use it as an excuse to keep glancing toward a particular table. Every throw accidentally too short, so he has to walk over and retrieve his miss, each time offering an exaggerated apology. Nearby, two women share a plate of olives, their heads close as they whisper and laugh. Every so often, one of them glances toward the doorway as though expecting someone, or hoping to be noticed by whoever passes. The atmosphere is built for slow escalation. You take a sip of your own wine, feeling its warmth unfurl in your chest, and notice how easy it is to lean a little closer to the stranger beside you when the room is this compact. The hum of conversation gives cover, the low light softens faces, and every shared bite of bread feels more personal than it probably should. At the far end, a group begins singing low, off-key, and clearly tipsy. The tune is familiar enough that you find yourself humming along without meaning to. It's in that unguarded moment that you catch a smile from across the table. A brief, private acknowledgement, as if you'd just been caught in something slightly embarrassing but harmless. When the evening begins to cool and the papina's shutters are propped open to let the breeze in, you realize you've lost track of time. The woman with the poised fingers rises, leaving her cup behind, and steps out into the night without looking back. The man she'd been speaking with hesitates, then follows, though not too closely. You finish your drink, the garum tang still sharp on your tongue, and step outside. Behind you, the hum of the papina continues, little embers of laughter and glances flickering in the warm Roman night. The night air is cooler now, carrying the scent of damp stone and crushed mint from someone's discarded herb bundle. You wander through the twisting lanes, your sandals tapping on cobblestones still warm from the day. The noise of the papina fades behind you, replaced by the soft trickle of a courtyard fountain somewhere nearby. It's here, in the quieter quarters of the city, that the real secrets of Roman flirtation unfold. Public places, the baths, the forum, the circus are for display. But private gardens, tucked behind high walls and discreet gates, are for testing what might grow from those earlier sparks. You spot one such gate ahead, half hidden in the shadows between two brick walls. The iron latch is ornamented with vines, its green paint flaking like old leaves. Through the narrow opening drifts the perfume of night-blooming jasmine, mingled with the faint rustle of palm fronds shifting in the breeze. Inside, the world changes. Moonlight washes over marble benches, glinting off the polished surface of a small pool in the center. The water catches every ripple of light like liquid glass. A pair of figures walk slowly along the garden's edge, their footsteps softened by the grass. Historians still argue whether private gardens in Rome were meant primarily for display of wealth or for personal retreat. Maybe they were both. Grand enough for guests to admire in daylight, but intimate enough for hushed conversations after sunset. You see it in the way the two walkers lean in toward each other, their words nearly swallowed by the sound of the fountain. Every so often, one gestures toward a statue or a flowering shrub, but you can tell the point isn't the plant, it's the closeness. A quirky detail catches your eye. A small stone sundial half buried in the dirt, its shadow invisible now in the moonlight. Someone has tucked a folded scrap of papyrus into the crack between its base and the ground. The temptation to check it is strong. When no one's looking, you slide it out and glance at the ink. A quick sketch of two interlocking laurel wreaths. No names, no words, just a symbol left here for someone who would understand. Elsewhere in the garden, you catch a flicker of movement. A woman in a pale stola slips behind a column just as a man in a short cloak approaches from the other path. They meet in the shadow, speaking in low tones before disappearing together toward a hidden alcove. The place is alive with quiet possibilities. The moonlight seems to encourage slower movements, gentler voices, and the sort of glances that linger too long to be casual. You sit on a cool marble bench, tracing the carved patterns beneath your fingers, and watch as the pair by the pool pause to look up at the stars. One points out a constellation, and though you can't hear their words, the tilt of their heads says enough. They're inventing a story together, one that will fade with the night but leave its warmth. Eventually, you rise and make your way toward the gate again. The jasmine scent clings to you as you step back into the street, carrying the quiet hum of the garden with you. The city beyond feels louder now, more hurried. But you've seen how even in Rome's endless bustle, there are pockets of stillness where something as simple as a moonlit walk can speak louder than any grand gesture. The streets open into a small marketplace, the kind that comes alive in the cooler hours. Oil lamps sway from wooden posts, casting circles of gold over stalls piled high with figs, pomegranates, and bright bunches of herbs. The air is rich with mingled scents. Fresh bread still steaming in baskets, resin from burning incense, the faint tang of sea salt from a fishmonger closing up for the night. In the midst of it all, you notice a curious pattern. Not all transactions are about money. Some are little performances, laced with laughter, exaggeration, and careful timing. You watch a young man at a fruit stall press a single fig into a woman's palm, his fingers just brushing hers. She inspects it like a jeweler examining a rare gem, then raises an eyebrow and asks if it's the sweetest he has. He swears on Jupiter's beard that it is, and that if it's not, she can keep the whole basket. Historians still argue whether such moments were genuine flirtations or just market theatrics designed to keep customers loyal. But you can't ignore the quickness of the woman's smile, or the way she lingers to choose another fig even after paying. You pass a spice seller who has a different tactic. He grinds cinnamon and cassia right there at the counter, letting the fragrant dust drift in the lamplight. He offers a pinch to a passerby just to smell. But when she leans in, he says the aroma is best when shared with company over warm wine. It's the kind of line that could be harmless or an invitation. A quirky little custom plays out at the flower stall. Here, people sometimes exchange blooms not as purchases but as tokens. A single white rose might mean, "I saw you yesterday," while a sprig of rosemary might whisper, "Remember me." You watch one man pretend to browse, only to slide a violet toward the stall keeper with a coin hidden in its petals. The flower is quickly passed to a woman at the far end of the table without a word. You stop at a pottery vendor's stand, drawn by the smooth, pale cups stacked in neat rows. The vendor, an older woman with sharp eyes, catches you looking at a set painted with interlocking vines. "Good for wine," she says, "or for giving to someone you wish would share wine with you." There's a knowing tilt to her voice, and you suspect she's seen her fair share of markets turn into matchmaking grounds. Beyond the stalls, a small crowd has gathered where a boy plays the double flute. His tune is quick and playful, and people fall into step, swaying or clapping as they pass. You notice a man take the opportunity to match his pace to a woman's as they walk together toward the fountain. They exchange names, maybe a joke, and though they part at the next corner, both are smiling when they do. By the time you leave the market, You realize that these exchanges, whether through figs, flowers, or finely painted cups, are never just about the object itself. They're about the hand that gives it, the glance that comes with it, and the small, unspoken hope that the gesture will be remembered tomorrow. The night stretches thin now, the streets cooling under a sky dusted with stars. You find yourself back where the city's lights fade toward the countryside, near the gates, where travelers prepare to leave at dawn. It's quieter here, but not without its own charged energy. Farewell feasts spill from the doorways of roadside inns, their laughter and song drifting out into the cool air. Inside one such inn, long wooden tables are crowded with plates of roasted meat, bowls of olives, and jugs of deep red wine. The atmosphere is different from the rowdy feasts you've seen before. There's joy, but it's threaded through with something softer, a bittersweet awareness that these gatherings are temporary. People lean closer, their voices low enough to force the listener nearer still. You watch as a soldier in a travel cloak shares one last drink with a woman in a green stola. He tells her something that makes her laugh, but the sound catches at the end, half joy, half ache. Historians still argue whether such partings were taken lightly in a world where travel was common, or whether every departure felt heavier because letters could take weeks or months, if they arrived at all. At the far end of the room, a merchant unwraps a small package and slides it across the table. It's a carved wooden amulet, no bigger than a thumb, shaped like a dolphin. His companion turns it over in her palm, tracing the grooves, before tucking it into her belt without a word. A gift here doesn't need explanation. The meaning is in the weight of the object and the fact that it's given at all. You step outside for a moment. Beyond the glow of the doorway, travelers make last rounds of the courtyard, some exchanging hurried whispers, others holding hands until the final call from the gatekeeper. The air is cool enough to raise goosebumps, but you notice no one seems in a rush to pull away from an embrace. A quirky little farewell tradition plays out by the water trough. Two friends share a drink from the same clay cup, each taking a turn before shattering it on the stones. "So it won't be used by anyone else," you hear one say. Whether it's superstition or sentiment, it makes the moment theirs alone. Back inside, the soldier rises, fastening his cloak. The woman walks him to the threshold, their steps slow as though they could stretch the distance into hours. When he finally steps into the night, he glances back, not with the sharpness of a formal goodbye, but with the kind of look that promises he'll carry this memory on the road. You take a deep breath, feeling the blend of warmth and ache that comes with any ending. Farewells, you realize, are their own kind of flirting, words and touches sharpened by the knowledge that they can't last forever. And now the streets grow still. The voices fade into murmurs, the clink of cups replaced by the hum of crickets beyond the walls. You walk slowly, letting the cooler air settle around you like a cloak, each step softer than the last. The lamps along the road sway gently in the breeze, their light rippling across the stone like moonlight over water. You pass an empty bench, the same marble kind you've seen in gardens and forums, and imagine the echoes of the day lingering there. The laughter in the baths, the perfume in the market, the music from the street corner. They drift now like smoke, fading into the night. The city exhales. The tension and color of its endless flirtations sink into the shadows, replaced by the quiet rhythm of a place at rest. Somewhere, a final door closes. Somewhere else, a lone musician plays the last notes of a tune, letting them hang in the air before the silence takes them. You find yourself slowing even more, until the motion feels less like walking and more like floating through the cool darkness. The scents are softer now. Baked bread gone cold, fading incense, the faintest hint of sea air. Above, the stars seem closer, their light unbroken by the bustle of the day. And you know, in this moment, that Rome will wake again with the same heartbeat. Markets and music, gardens and glances, beginnings and goodbyes. But for now it rests, and so should you. Close your eyes, let the last of the night breeze brush against your cheek, and carry these images with you into sleep. The marble will still be warm when morning comes.